public can go to, like, in theaters and such. So it was a major civil rights really win for the disability community when it was passed in 1990. And looking at it, the major intent of the law is to prohibit discrimination against individuals with disabilities based on their disability. And it also opened up a more accessibility for people with disabilities in all types of ways. So when I use the word access, it's the accessibility for people that may use wheelchairs or other types of mobility devices to be able to get into buildings safely, would be use ramps and so forth. It's accessibility for people with different types of disabilities to join in on programs and services that are offered to other people within the public. And it's access to the digital environment, the built environment, as I just mentioned, and really so much more. As I said, it was truly needed for a long, long time. Going back a bit, and this is not going to be a history lesson at all, but just to let people know that may not realize, some of the disability rights advocates and people with disabilities and their allies that wanted to see equity for the disability community started to work on some of these things in the 1960s into the 1970s. And there were many disability advocates that were trying to push something like the Americans with Disabilities Act. They wanted civil rights, and they followed the guidebook in a way from the women's rights movement that happened a lot in the 60s, in the 70s, as well as the civil rights from the 50s and the 60s and moving forward. So it's civil rights. People with disability should have the rights as any other person to be able to live, to recreate, to go to school, to socialize in all aspects of their life. I happen to be a person with a disability. And just to back up a bit, I want to give a self description. I'm a woman, older woman. I have a pink blouse on. I have light brown hair. I'm white, and I'm wearing like rose-colored glasses. But I can see the positive side of the ADA, and that we are so fortunate that it was finally passed. I would have liked to see it passed a long time before, but it was, and here we are. So. When I personally, I happen to be legally blind. I have been blind since I was 17 years of age. And that was in the 1970s when I was 17, right? So that was a long time before the ADA was passed. I also am in recovery from substance use disorder. That was since my early 20s, which is also a disability that oftentimes people overlook, but being in recovery, that's something that is a disability, and, you're protected if you're clean and sober, you're protected in employment and other situations. So for myself, all through school, K through 12, and I began to lose vision in fourth grade around age 9 or 10. And I went to many, many specialists all over the South Shore of Massachusetts, all over Boston, had a variety of diagnoses that were incorrect for 8 years. And then I was finally diagnosed correctly. So for me, that was all before even the educational rights in Chapter 766, which in Massachusetts really tried to make a more of an equal playing field for students with disabilities in K through 12. But when I went to college, I went to UMass Boston. I took advantage of the Disability Services Center. And for me personally, that was a lot of the beginning of my acceptance with my own disability. I was meeting people there. I had people read for me. the books that weren't on tape. And at the time we used like records, believe it or not, or cassette tapes that were 4-track cassette tapes. And I got to meet a lot of people that had a lot of different disabilities. There was, there were a lot of folks using wheelchairs. There was people that were like an amputee. There were people that were deaf. Really the whole gamut. And I think for me at that point in time, I was able to meet people as people, and the disability was just a side issue. And for me, that helped me with my own personal acceptance, because prior to that, and I'm going back into the 70s, right? The stigma was much, much more than it is now. And the sad truth, the reality, is that I, as a young adolescent, internalized the stigma that was placed on us, people with disabilities. And I did feel less than, low confidence. I wouldn't talk about it. I didn't share it. I didn't want to be made fun of. And the list goes on and on. So, when I was actually in my 30s when the ADA went through, and, at this point in time, I'm a proud person. I'm a woman with dignity. I'm a woman that can stand tall and hold my white cane and, show up to the world as a blind professional person. And that's a gift. That's a gift. And this socially, people were trying to make those changes. So sometimes people say, what came first, the social change or the law? Did the law create social change? Did the social change create law? And I think it can be looked at in both ways. But what I do know now in 2024 is that we, the advocates, people with disabilities and all of their allies with the ADA, and continuing to move forward towards more equity, more accessibility for all of us, we're more included. When I say we, I'm talking about the disability community. So it's a wonderful legislation that took a long time to work out in a lot of aspects of what needed to be done. But there is so much more acceptance and inclusion for people with disabilities in today's world. It is amazingly different than it was back then. So I'm really, proud to be a person with a disability and have it be the current times, because technology has advanced so much that many of us are able to use technology to do all types of things within our activities of daily living, functional activities of daily living, our work lives, and all of the rest. So I think you'll really enjoy today's panel. There's going to be a coordinator and there's panelists. Then they'll be speaking about their own personal journeys and some of their involvement with and around the disability community. So that's it for me for now. Just, to kind of wrap up, I just would really like to ask everyone, just sit back, enjoy today's presentation. I think it will be very much inspiring, educational, informative. And thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you continue to look at MOD's offerings, because we have a lot of training, and, we're trying to reach out to folks more than we have and continue to do that. So thank you for your attention. And I'd like to turn the mic over to the General Counsel of Mass Office on Disability, Julia O'Leary. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julia O'Leary. As Mary said, I'm the General Counsel here at Massachusetts Office on Disability. As a quick visual description, I am a 30-something white woman with blondish hair pulled back in a kind of severe ponytail. We're here today to celebrate the ADA. And the ADA and similar laws really only work if people know about them. And that's where the Massachusetts Office on Disability comes in. We provide information, guidance, and training about disability-related civil rights and architectural access, and how these laws and regulation impact the daily lives of people with disabilities. We support government, business, housing providers, and more by providing information, guidance, and training on how to comply with their legal obligations so that they can be accessible to all. MOD has a lot to be proud of this year. We have responded to over 200 inquiries per month from people who want to know more about their rights and obligations under disability rights law. For example, one constituent called because they were facing eviction if they didn't get rid of their service dog. MOD's expert staff listened to the constituent and evaluated their situation. They explained to the constituent that they had a right to have their service dog in their apartment so long as it was reasonable. And they helped them draft a letter to their landlord to effectively assert their rights. Now that constituent is happily in their apartment with their dog. So, the work that we do at MOD to educate people about their rights and obligations really has tangible consequences. Last fiscal year, we also started a municipal ADA coordinator peer resource group. This group meets regularly for training, networking, and open office hours. This has allowed us to equip municipal ADA coordinators with the knowledge and resources that they need to comply with the ADA. MOD is committed to ensuring that every individual with a disability in the Commonwealth has maximum access to municipal programs and services, regardless of where they live. A couple exciting projects that are coming up this fiscal year at MOD. We are expanding our financial and technical support to municipalities. This fiscal year, we're providing $5 million in municipal ADA improvement grant funds to go towards municipal accessibility planning and projects, which is an increase from previous years. We're continuing our close involvement with partners at the state level, including the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board and the Digital Accessibility and Equity Governance Board. We're also continually updating our website to bring the most accurate, comprehensive, and up-to-date information to the public about disability-related legal rights and obligations. I want to take a little time to talk about the state of the ADA today before we start our panel. The ADA was passed in 1990, and that was a long time ago in technology years. So this was before we had smartphones, or Google, or Section 508. But what we're seeing is that the ADA is a broadly applicable law that has the flexibility to adapt to our changing world. We're seeing more and more discussion around how the ADA applies to the digital world. For example, this spring, the Department of Justice issued new regulations setting standards for digital accessibility compliance for state and local governments. We're also seeing a growing interest in how the ADA applies to areas outside of school and work, like the accessibility of state and municipal parks, concerts and theaters, and other areas that make life fun. And I think at the end of the day, Mass Office on Disability is here to help both people with disabilities and the places that serve them understand how the ADA applies to our changing world and every aspect of modern life for people with disabilities. So with that, I am very excited to introduce Bill Noonan, who is Mass Office on Disability's Executive Assistant and who will be kicking off our panel. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Newman. For visual description, I'm a 45-year-old white male with a shaved head and a bit of a scraggly beard. I work here at the Massachusetts Office on Disability. It's a pleasure to be the moderator for the panel discussion today on what we're calling Disability Identity, Community, and Justice, the ADA's 34th anniversary. I think about something like this, I can't help but be reminded of a very important person in my life, that person being my mother. When I was growing up, anytime we saw something inspiring, it could have been on the television news, it could have been in the newspaper, it could have just been out in the community. My mother would turn to my brother and I and go, "That is what good looks like." And our panelists are here today because they are what good looks like. And it's thrilled to be able to introduce them. I'd love to start off with Richard Rodriguez. Richard is both an attorney as well as the ADA coordinator for the city of Lawrence. In addition, he's a member of the advisory board for both the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination as well as Asperger's Works, which is based on payroll. We have Sarah Wiles. Sarah's a colleague of mine here at the Massachusetts Office on Disability, where she works as an advocate in our client assistance program. Sarah is also a proud graduate of the Western New England University School of Law. We'd also like to welcome Jim Weiss. Jim is both the president of the board at the Boston Self-Help Center, as well as a board member for the Boston Center for Independent Living. Prior to that, he was a longtime director of accessibility and disability resources at Wellesley College, and also an avid power wheelchair soccer player. And we're rounding out our panel with Elaine Mullen. Elaine is a longtime disability rights advocate, a member of the U.S. Pain Foundation, as well as Rare New England. She's a poet and author with 4 books and a 5th on the way. That's very exciting, Elaine. And is not only a 2-time cancer survivor, she is a 2-time cancer thriver. And I like that phrase, Elaine. So I want to welcome all of our guests. I think we have a wonderfully powerful and discussion ahead of us. I'm just going to kick things off by asking the questions, and I thought we could then open the floor to whoever would like to speak first or speak at all, and just being respectful of others' time and opinions. So welcome, everyone. The first question I have is, would you please let us know if you identify as a person with a disability and what that identification means to you?
Hi, my name is Sarah. I am a early 30s woman with brown hair. I am visually impaired or blind. So I do identify as a person with a disability. I feel most proud of that identity when I'm in spaces like this, where I'm amongst other people with disabilities. Whether that means we're navigating a disability related issue or topic or just talking about life, I'm really proud of the person that I am, including my disability and those related strengths and challenges. I'm somebody who would prefer to just be identified as a blind person, although I know that, other people prefer different language around that. Thank you.
Hi, this is Jim Weiss. I am a male, and I identify with he, his, him pronouns, and I use a power wheelchair. I'm about 6'1", and Mary and I are both in the same generation, more or less. And I definitely identify as being a person with a disability, and I'm glad Sarah brought up the language kind of piece of things, and hopefully we can talk more about that. I kind of like the person first language, but I think in talking about the ADA and about disability awareness, I think it's important for people to be comfortable with whatever language they choose to be comfortable with. In terms of how I identify as having a disability, I tend to focus on my environment. So I feel less like I have a disability when I'm in an accessible environment. So if I've got the power doors, if I've got the elevators in the building, if I can get at the right counter space and all of those things, then I'm less likely to be thinking about having a disability. When there isn't the access, that's where it usually comes up more.
Mm.
And I'll pass it on to one of my panelists here.
Hi, my name is Elaine Mullen. My nickname is Laney. I am a 66-year-old white woman wearing black foreman's glasses. I'm always very eager to identify as a person with disabilities. I have physical disabilities. I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor, a spinal cord injury survivor, and I have mental disabilities as well, psychiatric, and some cognitive impairments from my injuries. But I always feel empowered in communities like this, in the disability community. It's a celebration of who I am. I've published 4 books, and a lot of my poetry is about, challenges that sometimes are actually opportunities. And so I am always eager to learn. And that's what I like about the disability community, is that we learn from each other. And I too grew up in the 60s and 70s. I have a substance abuse history. I've been in recovery for 44 years now. And I remember a time when I once lost a job because of my disability, and now because of the ADA, that could not happen. So thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Laney. That was wonderful. And again, a reminder too that disabilities run the gamut from physical, emotional, psychiatric, substance abuse, learning disabilities. They affect so many of us.
Good afternoon. My name is Richard Rodriguez. And originally, I never identified myself as a person with disability. I was born with a number disability, hearing problem, speech delay, and learning delayed. I was a special ed student for most of my life. But I identified myself as a person with disability when I was discriminated against a job I had. I was doing great in a job.
We just lost him.
I'm sorry, I think we might have a bit of a signal problem with Richard. We don't want to lose his thought though, so let's try and get him back. In the meantime, I thought I might jump into the next question while we work on Richard. Has your personal relationship with disability changed over your lifetime? And if yes, how?
I can take this again. This is Sarah. So I would say that I've definitely gotten a lot more comfortable with navigating the unfairness that comes along with being in a world that's mostly developed for people without disabilities, or at least not built with disability in mind. So, I think we're getting a lot better these days, but I can definitely remember times when I felt like that unfairness was getting in the way of me really participating fully in life. For example, and this is just a really small example, but audio descriptions for media, for shows, for TV, movie, those really weren't as common back, 20 years ago. And so I remember just kind of watching TV growing up and being part of that 90s Nickelodeon generation, and much of that was, none of that was audio described. I was kind of just making my brother describe it all. And then to kind of look back now and to see that kids now do have access to at least a considerable amount of content that is audio described. I love to see that, and I love to see it for myself too, no pun intended. And I think what I've kind of come to learn is that sometimes that unfairness can be remedied, through things like the ADA or other laws. Sometimes it can't. And sometimes, even if it can, I just don't have the time or maybe the mental capacity or energy. So I've become more discerning of what types of things are going to, take my time in terms of navigating, not internalizing other people's discomfort or ignorance about my disability, and being able to just navigate that as much as I can, staying focused on what the end goal is. I think that's the biggest change that I've had so far, and we'll see what else is left to come.
I'm going to follow in line after Sarah again here, and it's Jim Weiss. And I think I'm going to take personal relationship with disability somewhat liberally. So I had a spinal cord injury back in '79. And so initially things were pretty much focused on me and my needs and getting back to school. And I was studying mechanical engineering. But then some things shifted in terms of opportunities, and I ended up getting into higher ed and disability services. And so my relationship with disability changed a bit because I was interacting with a lot more folks who had disabilities and kind of gaining some insights that some of us share similar experiences and some of us share different experiences. And kind of through this career I've had in higher ed and disability primarily, when I started out in higher ed and disability services, we were working more with folks with physical, visible disabilities. Then some things started to shift towards more students with learning disabilities, then students with ADHD. And now if you go to higher ed, you'll see that the majority of folks, probably almost 50%, have some sort of mental health related need. So it's that whole experience has been a whole different world for me. And again, while going through all this process, I think I had the experience of going back to school with the support of the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, being able to go into, at least initially, some subsidized accessible housing, due to some other benefits, to have some Social Security benefits, to do some programs that led to working. And now, I benefited from using the Common Health program while I was working, and then to be more or less retired for the past year, at least from paid work. But I got to tell you, every night I seem to have these dreams like there's some work I still have to do, and I'm doing it in my head. And I have to keep telling myself, no, you don't work there anymore. You don't have to do anything else in that area. But it still happens. So that's been my kind of personal relationship and how it's changed over time.
Hi, this is Elaine again. My personal relationship with disability has evolved significantly over the years because I was born with ADHD, but I don't want to say major, but my most life-changing disability was a motor vehicle accident in 1976, traumatic brain injury and severe spinal cord injury. But a lot of other disabilities, appeared over time. The first was depression, clinical depression, and then I was diagnosis was changed to bipolar, and anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder from the accidents, if nothing else, and other things, and having hemiplegic migraines and trigeminal neuralgia and other things. There are times that I can't even speak clearly and legibly, and it can be frightening. For people, they resemble strokes, but it's just like part of what I'm learning to live with. So my personal relationship has changed out of necessity, but it has also opened up a world venue of, you know, groups that I belong to, support groups, chronic pain support groups, Dual Recovery Anonymous support groups, where I have learned to move from acceptance, you know, from denial to acceptance, not really denial, but resistance, to embracing, to sharing, to enlightening. And I do that not only in my writing, but I continue to evolve because I just keep having diagnoses added, you know, as a result of some, you know, cancer and other things. But it's just, my road to recovery will always be under construction in life, in social norms, in, you know, in substance abuse, and in learning how to show up and participate and contribute wherever I am. I have something to offer, and to be helped by other people. Thank you.
Hello?
Oh, good. It's back.
Yeah, there was the light went off on my block.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So, going back shortly to question number one, originally, first, I'm Richard Rodriguez, and to identify myself, I have black hair, I'm wearing glasses, and I'm wearing a brown shirt with a tie. So originally, I never identified myself as a person with disability, despite I have many disabilities and was a special ed student for all my life. But going to question number two, my relationship with disability, it changed a lot. The reason it changed is I faced discrimination. Discrimination was I was in a school and I was discharged, and despite I was passing my classes and doing great, the problem was it was taking too long. It was taking too long for me to learn something. So they discharged me based on that. That's when I started to identify myself as a person who is disabled. And that's when I got involved at the disability right. And that's when I became a member of the Commission on Disability. And then I did great as the chairman of the commission, that when the governor's office asked me, do I want a position in the governor's office as a commission, I selected the Massachusetts Commission on Disability. Despite I don't get paid, but I fell in love in doing that type of work. I realized I'm not able to advocate for myself. It's very difficult. But I became a disability right advocate to advocate for other people who may experience the same thing as me. And me being an attorney, I know how to advocate for them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you to all of us. You know, I think that question really opened up and explored a number of ways that your disability changed over your lifetime. And I actually think our third question piggybacks nicely onto it. It's how has this civil rights legislation, specifically the ADA, affected you within various life domains? This could include housing, employment, any sort of social or recreational engagement. As I said, we sort of touched on that in the previous question, but I'd love to hear more from all of you.
I guess I'll just keep in the pattern of going first. I'm also realizing I didn't give a great description of myself, but I'm a 30-ish woman with brown hair and bangs, wearing an orange shirt, sleeveless. So how has the civil rights law affected me? Well, I think it's hard to compare because I was born after the ADA was passed. So it's a little hard to compare to what it might have been like before. The other issue for me is that it's hard to kind of parse out what's ADA, what's Civil Rights Act of 1964, what's the Rehab Act of 1973. and what might be state law. We have, pretty good state law here in Massachusetts that protects us. But I think when I try to parse out the ADA itself, something that comes to mind is that it's a tool that gives me confidence and less fear to live a fulfilling life as a person with disability. I kind of use it to evaluate situations when I feel like something happened that felt like it was wrong because of my disability, whether maybe that's trying to enter a rideshare vehicle, Lyft or Uber. Sometimes there's issues with using rideshare as a service dog, as a service dog handler. There's sometimes confusion or misunderstanding around that, so I will be denied access to a rideshare vehicle. That's also about being able to navigate, being requesting a reasonable accommodation based on disability. It's good to refer back to the ADA. And any time generally that I feel like someone treated me unfairly based on my disability and I have a question about that, I guess the ADA provides a context or a legal context for how to resolve some of those issues. It doesn't change much about the internal feelings about the situation that I have, but it can give me a framework. And as I said earlier, I have definitely become more discerning about what I think is worth spending my time doing. But I think the ADA has also helped me be able to separate out what is and is not legal. And it has definitely given me confidence to navigate some of the processes in place for people with disabilities, like requesting an accommodation.
So this is Jim Weiss. It's kind of interesting. I kind of want to piggyback on some of what Sarah said in terms of Massachusetts law, federal law. So the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Section 504. But I think what ADA also does is it's in some ways it's almost a marketing tool for accessibility. I bet you if we go out on the street and we ask people, so if everybody goes out, all 144 people who are on this call, you ask 3 or 4 people, name 3 disability laws that protect people's rights who have disabilities. About the only one they're probably going to be able to name is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Mm. And so I think that a lot gets covered by the ADA and a lot gets credited to the ADA. That's not all part of the ADA, but I think it's helped start to educate the public, the private sector, the municipal sector, that there are laws out there. Again, my spinal cord injury was in '79. I started working in higher ed disability services in '85. The colleges, the groups getting federal money, some sort of federal money, you had to follow the Rehabilitation Act. Sarah mentioned some access laws and accessibility going back to the 60s. Somebody else mentioned school access. Well, now in some ways, I think by saying Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, people bring all of that stuff together. And I don't think it's a bad thing, because no one out there in the street, unless they're on the inside, is going to know Rehabilitation Act of 1973, or if you say Section 504, or I think Julia mentioned Section 508. Some folks with disabilities will know about this, but the community won't. But the ADA, it says it's been advertised. We're continuing to do that work right here. And I don't know if you caught the NPR had a show yesterday where Bill Henning, Michael Mewey, somebody else were on a panel talking with reporters. So
it was Leo.
It was you. Okay.
Leo.
Oh, okay. Somebody I don't know, but I do know Mike and Bill Henning. So I think it's been better presented to the world And, for me, I think it's benefited me in doing the work in higher ed, because I also would help with staff and faculty employment and even student employment, and accessibility and architectural access and a lot of other things. So the community understands more about ADA than any other law. And I guess I'll pass it on to Elaine if we're staying in our kind of tracks here.
Thank you, Jim. Hi, this is Elaine again. Yeah, the ADA Act has helped me in obtaining housing and employment. I went to mass rehab and gained employment training to work at Roads Responsibility, a day program, back in the mid-2000s. And just actually legal counsel when I needed it. And reasonable accommodation in finding housing again, because I actually ended up due to a problem with a medication that was given to me. I ended up with some charges. I was found not guilty, but I was incarcerated on a forensic unit for 18 months and could have done some serious time or something, but I faced it because I had support systems. And where I was, Worcester Recovery Center and Hospital, I was there for 18 months, rehabilitating physically as well as mentally. I received such incredible support, person-centered, treatment plan that I had a say in, and introduced to all different kinds of role models I knew nothing about, Pat Deegan and other things, and just really tailored my own growth out of that. What could have been the end of my life turned into another opportunity to do something else. And I even took training as a certified peer specialist, but then the cancer came back again, and so I deferred. That's part of the problem, living with challenges. You kind of remain flexible, and so I always surrender to situations as they are. But I have been helped on every single front in my life through the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm very grateful for it. So with that, I will turn it over to the next person.
Hi, Attorney Richard Rodriguez. How the ADA affected me personally is I would like to share a story, and this has been published in First newspaper. I was arrested once, not because I was guilty of the crime, because I was a disabled person. I was using a train pass, and the train pass was written in pencil and not script, because I did not have the ability to know how to use a pen or to write script. So I tried to enter the train and I showed my train pass to the officer. The officer told me that I was breaking the law because it was not in proper format. So while trying to explain to him my disability, he responded by saying, "Why you talk to me funny? Why you being sarcastic to me?" So the more I try to explain, he got upset and he arrested me. He arrested me for disorderly conduct. He arrested me for resisting arrest. And then he took me to this dirty bathroom. He banged my head against the wall and said, "This will teach you a lesson not to be disrespectful to a police officer." Eventually, the case was dismissed because I brought documentation that I suffer from learning disability. I have a hearing problem, and most of all, I have a speech delay. So I was not being disrespectful. So that's why I always say I was arrested, not because I was guilty of the crime, but because of my disability.
Hmm.
And it made you seem like you had an attitude problem, Richard.
That's correct.
Amazing. Absolutely. Yikes. Well, and actually, Richard, your example sort of piggybacks onto the next question that I had for the folks here. We would love it if you could share an experience that you've had regarding accessibility and inclusion, which could be a positive or a negative instance, and what you learned from that experience. Now, obviously, if this is completely if folks are comfortable doing so.
Well, like I said, I was discriminated against once. And at that time, I never identified myself as a disabled person. I was very proud. And you would not know I have a disability. You know, I have a hearing problem. And at that time, I had major speech delay. And I still suffer from learning disability. So I never identified myself until I experienced being discharged. So I'm glad we have the ADA, and now I use it for my benefit, and I use it for the benefit of other people. Now, it's my experience, education is very important, because a person who is disabled, sometimes they do not know their rights. Like I give you an example, I was a special student. My mother didn't speak English. She did not know how to read or write. And every time when there was an evaluation and the IEP, they would tell her, sign here. And of course, she followed the instruction of the teacher. She would sign here. Now, I get involved and educate parents with IEP. You have the right to participate in a meeting. You have the right to give you recommendation about what type of accommodation is great for your child. And you have the right to disagree. So that's basically because of the ADA was enacted. Now, I did use the ADA once for myself when I took the bar to become an attorney. I write very slow because of my disability. So for the first time in my life, I did ask for reasonable accommodation to have extra time so I could complete my tests. And I did pass the bar because of the reasonable accommodation. Thank you.
Awesome. Congrats, Richard. I'm going through that process soon myself. This is Sarah again. So for me, interestingly enough, I got my position here at MOD with the Client Assistance Program 2 weeks before the ADA turned 30. And I don't know that that's a huge, I mean, I think that the ADA has allowed me to be able to work somewhere where disability is pretty normalized here. I think that, that's also because I work with some really great people, but in terms of accessibility and inclusion, I think about my job because here at MOD, we have other people with disabilities, and disability is just kind of part of our culture. So it feels pretty normal to just kind of casually troubleshoot issues with screen readers and ask questions, get oriented to the physical space. I can't say that in other professional settings, I've always felt so comfortable just saying, hey, where am I at? But another thing that comes to mind is how right now AI is such a powerful tool with interpreting, like visual interpreting, whether it's describing a picture, reading a menu, reading a sign. The other day I used a tool to figure out my computer wasn't talking to me, so I pointed my phone camera at it and I figured out what I need to do. So it's pretty amazing. There's obviously pros and cons to AI. It's not 100% reliable. It's not necessarily fully developed yet. And there, you have to be careful with all this stuff. But for me, it's actually also become quite a tool with fashion, because now I can like tell what my friends are wearing on their Facebook pictures and just that kind of fun stuff. There's smart glasses that people can get now that they can wear and take pictures and videos, and it will describe things. I also just wanted to point out that Mattel just released Blind Barbie, so people can purchase her I may have to and pretend that I'm doing it for a child in my life. So I I think accessibility and inclusion has come a long way.
So this is Jim Weiss. I think you could spend hours going back and forth on positives and negatives, and all of us probably have 100 stories to tell. I was trying to think of one that people might find useful, and I think it's in that equity realm. And this was when I was back in school, and um, even though Mass Rehab had helped make my home accessible at the time, I really didn't have personal care attendants in place to go back home during the winter break. So I tried to stay, and I won't say the institution, but I tried to stay in the residence halls during winter session. And I was told no, because the accessible residence halls were for graduate students and they weren't accessible. So, probably at the time, I probably didn't know a lot about legal aspects, and this is before ADA, but I understood at least there were equity issues. So I wrote a letter to the chancellor of the school and explained that, hey, everybody else who wants to go to winter session can go and live on campus, and I'm being told I can't. So I wound up getting the director of residential life coming to meet with me in my room, and he opened up a residence hall just for me. And then it turned out that there were other folks, of course, with disabilities who wanted to join me. And so there were 3, 4 of us in this residence hall. So in some ways, it started off as a negative. It turned out to be a positive, and probably was something educational for everybody. It also, I think, helped me get a job later on. Well, I guess that might disclose where I went. If you look at my resume somewhere, because I was told by the director of disability services that, that impressed him when I became a part-time, not a part-time, but a interim assistant director of disability services. So I guess the big thing I'm trying to say is, if you're looking to advocate for yourself, you're looking to advocate for others, look at equity. I mean, folks with disabilities should have the same access that everybody else has.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. And Elena, I didn't want to skip over you if you had any thoughts on that.
Yes, no, I was just going to say accessibility and inclusion. Where
Elaine,
oh, yeah.
sorry, you off for a second. Could you come a little closer to your microphone?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I have a tendency. Are you not able to hear me?
It's a little quiet. If you can just move a little closer to the.
Okay, actually, let me try and, yeah, I'm sorry. Yep, and I'll turn up. Can you hear me now?
It's better.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Yep, okay.
thank you.
Yeah, no, the accessibility and the inclusion, I filed reasonable accommodation where I've just moved to because I'm having major, and it happened today. I couldn't, for an hour before the meeting, I just completely lost access. And so I have my doctor file a reasonable accommodation to try and get some help from Verizon, the vendor here. And I've been kind of like left on my own. My reasonable accommodation request to move to an apartment where the phone system is running all the time. My TV doesn't run, but mainly I need for, interacting with my doctors and my treatment teams, because of cancer and everything else, and my providers. I need to be able to communicate and even order food and so on and so forth. So it really is restricting me in my life. And it was denied. So I signed up for the MOD's reasonable accommodation and modification requests in housing, so I can learn what I need to see what I can do to make that happen, so that I have accessibility from home, because more and more, due to my last 2 conditions that I've acquired, Getting out and traveling is going to be more and more challenging for me. And I do a lot of telehealth and video, appointments. So, and I had to fight for those appointments, and not fight, but to prove that I, mandated them. So it's been an ongoing thing. I'm always in the process of learning, how to advocate for myself. And I've been doing it for other people, but it's still, I'm learning, and I'm very grateful for the help. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And I want to thank all of our panelists. We've sort of been talking about we've been exploring the past and the present with these last few questions, but I thought we could sort of delve a bit into the future. And I was thinking that for all of you, where do you think the focus should be within the overall social justice movement for individuals with disabilities in the next few years, or even as far as several decades down the road?
This is Sarah again. So for me, I think it's my main hopes are for education and employment. I always say employment. I think it's maybe gotten better. I hope it continues to. I don't want that work to ever stop. I think continuing to explore non-traditional options, apprenticeships, things like that, or any kind of opportunity where you're building it to draw on people's strengths and not limitations. And I think that self-employment is an option that folks should be, encouraged to explore if they have a particular skill set. But that's where I'll always say that I want to see the most growth is more people with disabilities who want to work, that are working, being incentivized to work, and getting the education that they want to be able to have the skills that they want.
So this is Jim Weiss. So when I look at that particular question about the future, I feel comfortable that we have architectural access codes in place to handle physical access kinds of things. So I'm less worried there. I also kind of believe that we're in a good position with experience with education and with some of the technology that's out there. For me, I also agree with Sarah in terms of employment. I think housing is very important with the broad population that identifies as having a disability, and some folks who don't identify, especially the folks with dual diagnosis and that kind of thing that are kind of out there and not in good shape housing wise. Healthcare as well. The news right now, people are advocating that the governor not vote out personal care attendant benefits or cut personal care attendant benefits. So that in the future, I think is also one. I would personally like to see that there be some sort of nationalized program so that, I don't know about other folks, but I would never feel comfortable moving away from Massachusetts, because I know the benefits that are here in Massachusetts, but they differ from New York and California, and I use personal care attendant services. Why should I feel like I can't, maybe I want to be a snowbird and go to Florida or something. So I would like to see that more uniformly done. And maybe it takes, an ADA or, some other legislation. And then the big one, the big elephant in the room too, is the internet, and making sure that the technology is accessible as people go out, and you or I could go up and throw up a web page and it could be inaccessible. And how does that not happen? So those again, the employment, the housing, the healthcare, and the internet seem like four big ones that need to be addressed in the next decades and now.
And what I would like to see is create lasting change for people who have been, people with disabilities who have been, multiply marginalized, especially those who have been like dual diagnosis, people who have been homeless, people who have been incarcerated, people, within the system, or even just at the forensic level, reintegrating back into society, and the LGBTQ movements. I myself am a member of that group. And I think that we can still grow further, but especially for people who have been incarcerated and coming back into the system, it can be kind of challenging, especially now in terms of housing and opportunities. If you have a quarry or something, in my case, I did not end up with one, but it did hinder my obtaining housing until it was adjudicated and everything, and my hopes of finding housing. So it was a very real problem, because it's no surprise that people with dual diagnosis problems very often do end up in trouble with the law. And so there are things in place already, and I think that I'd like to see that work continue.
I think it's my turn.
Yes,
Okay. Hi, this is Richard Rodriguez. And I do believe, although the ADA is 34 years old, we need a lot of education is how is the ADA applicable or not applicable? A lot of people misunderstand it and don't apply it properly. Now, in regard to education, when I was offered the job to become the ADA coordinator for the City of Lawrence by the mayor, Brian Patena, I took it because I knew education was an issue. And as a disability person myself, I said, I would like to educate people of what the ADA stand for. In Lawrence, the ADA, I get a lot of kinds. And some of the questions I get relate to housing. For example, who should pay for a ramp when somebody is wheelchair user? That's one issue always come up. What is a service animal? That question always come up too. And the issue also come up tickets. A lot of people with handicap plaque are getting tickets while they should not get tickets. That issue come up. And related to employment, I still see a lot of people coming to me and say, I have a learning disability, and they discharge me because it takes too long for me to learn. So once again, I get involved and I give them advice about reasonable accommodation and how to write the letter. I would like to thank the Massachusetts Office of Disability because they've always been great to me. Anytime I have a question, I will ask them, and they always give me the right answer, and quickly too. Also, relate to education, we have to educate people what services available for people with disability. For example, I was also an MIC client. A lot of people don't know there's a lot of great services MIC will provide. For me, when I finished law school and was planning to take the bar, my writing skills not that great. They paid for a private tutor for me to pass the bar, particularly the writing test. So it's very important. Education of what services and what the ADA stands for is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I'd like to round out our planned questions here with one more to pause to the folks, and then hopefully we have a bit of time to open it up to Q&A from the audience so they can pick the brains of our wonderful panelists. But in closing, at least on my end, what advice do you all have for individuals who may be adjusting to a new disability?
Hi, it's Sarah. So my advice, be patient and take it one day at a time. Start with smaller attainable goals that you know you can reach. and build from there and build community, reach out. The people that loved you before you got your disability still love you, and they just maybe need to know what it is that you're struggling with. Utilize the resources that you have available, not just all the amazing people that love you, but also there's government resources like here at MOD. We can answer questions. There's the Centers for Independent Living. They're also a really great resource. Attend events, build your community, meet other people with your disability and other ones as well. And remember that you're not alone, and disability is normal. It's very human. It's pretty rare actually that someone will go through an entire lifetime and not experience at least a temporary disability. So remember that you're not alone and you are normal, and ask questions because you deserve answers.
Good.
So Jim Weiss here. Sarah really covered everything in that, so she's not leaving me a lot of space. The only thing I wanted to say, and it's something we, when I work in higher ed, when we do surveys, we find out that out of all the people at a college or university or wherever, who do the students look for? They look for peers, okay? And peers are great sometimes, but I would say, Sarah covered it, but I would say you want to go to the professionals, and you also want to go to some peers, because in terms of the professionals, folks have developed credentials, they know the resources, and that's all helpful. I think you never know in terms of the peers who you're going to find the right information from. And let's say I have a bad experience with some organization. So that may be my experience, but it may not be everybody's experience, and it may not be a reason to rule that group out. And I mean, I was thankful that when I had my spinal cord injury, I went back to college and in summer school, and we were, it was pre-ADA. We were segregated. I mean, so the summer dorm was the same winter dorm that I was trying to get into before. That was inaccessible, and it was for grad students. But I met a lot of folks with disabilities who taught me a lot. But that would be my, take what Sarah said, but also find the professionals and then talk to a number of people with disabilities and try to make your own decisions about next steps, and one step at a time. I'll kick it over to Elaine.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, Sarah, you were very, very comprehensive in your answer. That was great. And Jim, one thing I would say is, and something that I had to say to myself, is to be patient with myself, to be kind with myself. Networking, again, the technology, the resources, the people are there. Even Googling, I have, because I have a new challenge that I'm dealing with, and I've been doing research, and so I'm looking to both. I don't really have any peers in this particular thing, but I'm looking to my community, my ADA community, to try and also professionals, my doctors, to see what support groups and get treatment and everything for it. And then also, most importantly, is to going back to when I could no longer drive or do this or that, and I was home a lot and recovering. I explored what could I do with the additional time that I had on my hands, because I was no longer quite so socially active when I first stopped driving. I want to use PC, and I started writing my poetry, and I realized I was recovering from an operation, and so I explored, what else can I do if I can't do this? I published a couple of books, and now visually my detailed vision is, I'm low vision. I'm not, that visually impaired, but my painting even I have to change, and I've been asking the teacher, different techniques, and we're using brushes and getting an easel, and I'm standing, and I've got, large brushes, and I'm changing everything. So it's just being flexible and adaptable and always exploring what possibilities or talents maybe, other parts of your personality and your skill set and your hobbies that you can now explore and make the most of, and perhaps even channel into self-employment. Thank you.
I think it's my turn.
Yes, it is, Richard.
Okay, hi. For me, as the ADA coordinator, I visit a lot of students. I go to a lot of different events with the youth program. And these are special needs children. And some of them are repeating the grades and they want to drop out from high school. And my advice to them is never do that. And I use myself as an example. I graduated maybe at 20 years old in high school. And my teacher also advised me not to bother going to college because I would not make it because of my learning disability. I went to college, I completed college. It took me longer, but I completed. Went to law school. It took me longer, but I completed. And today I'm proud to say I have been practicing law for 18 years, admitted in the state of Massachusetts. And a lot of people come to me also for help with jobs. They will ask me, you have a disability, how are you able to work? How are you able to find work? My advice is do a lot of volunteer work. I never got a job on my own. I never do great in interview. I'm bad in interview. But I do a lot of volunteer work. When I was in college, I did a lot of internship. For the internship, I got a paralegal job with the Legal Society. In Lawrence, when I was in law school, I volunteered for the police department with the Department of Justice grant. When the position came up, I got the job. Now, as the ADA coordinator for the city of Lawrence, I volunteered as a member of the Commission on Disability, and I was the chairman. So when the position came up for the ADA coordinator, they asked me. So that's how I get my job, volunteer my time and services. That's the best way to learn. And by volunteer, they will see you not as a disabled person, but they see you as someone that's able to produce and contribute to society. So volunteer, also seek services, and never accept no. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Sage advice from yourself and all of our panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. Again, I don't think I can state thank you enough.